What is up, guys? It's your friendly neighborhood web war fanatic, and we are back today with another Lorcana video. So today we are going to be ranking all the inks in Lorcana and putting them into a tier list by which ink colors have the best character control in the game. So this isn't to say that a certain ink is better than another ink, because every ink specializes in different things, but in the specialization of character control and board control, these are the best inks in my subjective opinion. So let's go ahead and jump into here with the first ink, and we have the Steel ink. I'm going to go ahead and just put Steel here in the A tier. Steel is super duper versatile and definitely has tons of board control and a lot of direct damage. It has early game direct damage like Fire the Cannons, super solid being a 1-cost action that just deals 2 damage to a chosen character. You also have Smash, which is a 3-drop, which can do 3 damage to a chosen character. And you also have Let the Storm Rage On, which also costs 3, and you can do 2 damage to a chosen character and also draw a card. You also have Area Effect, so AoE damage like Grab Your Swords, which for 5 costs can do 2 damage to each opposing character. And Steel also has more concentrated damage, like And Then Along Came Zeus, which can do 5 damage to a single chosen character or to a location, right? So direct damage is one of the best ways to control the board and get rid of opposing characters, because if the opposing characters are not exerted, you can't attack them or challenge them, but you can still do direct damage to them. Also, you don't need to play your own characters and then wait for their ink to dry to have them attack. And you also don't need a rushing character, right? If you play direct damage through an action, you can just immediately trigger the effect and have immediate board presence by getting rid of those characters. In addition to this, if your opponent swarms the field with a bunch of weak characters that can quest for a lot, Steel has a way to do damage to all of them, like we mentioned earlier with the Grab Your Swords. You can also play Tinkerbell, which can do 1 damage to each opposing character whenever she enters play. Because of this versatility in actions, songs, and direct damage through the early game with 1-drop cards, and also in the late game with Grab Your Swords and Tinkerbell, Steel is a very powerful character controlling ink, and in my opinion, it definitely belongs here in the A tier, just being super duper solid. Okay, so let's move on to our next ink here, and we have Amber. So Amber is definitely not as good as Steel in terms of character control. Amber has cards like Prince Philip, a 4-drop uninkable. When this character challenges and is banished, you may banish the challenged character. This is not too strong of a board control effect, because you have to play Prince Philip, you have to wait for his ink to dry, and next turn he must be able to challenge another character, which means your opponent must have a character that's already exerted and vulnerable to a challenge. If your opponent does not have that, Prince Philip cannot attack that character. The other character must also be able to defeat Prince Philip for him to die, and then you can banish the challenge character, so you can't even choose a different character. This kind of feels bad because it means that you have to run Prince Philip into someone. He has to get defeated, and that character has to live for Prince Philip to later on banish that character. If another character challenges Prince Philip and they defeat Prince Philip during your opponent's turn, then Prince Philip cannot use his effect because he's not the one challenging. This is not a super reliable way to remove characters. Here's an action that's very similar to Prince Philip. It's a 2-drop uninkable called Last Stand. Banish chosen character who was challenged this turn. That means you need to already have another character. You need your opponent to have an exerted character that you can challenge, and then you need to not defeat that character through your character challenging, and then you can play the Last Stand and banish that character. This kind of feels bad because you need to do 2 things to get rid of that character. You need your character to perform an action and to challenge that character, which means that most of the time you need the ink to draw on your character so it won't happen immediately, and then you need to play the Last Stand, which costs 2 ink. This is another not so great way to remove characters from the board. Amber also has songs like World's Greatest Criminal Mind, where you can banish a chosen character with 5 attack or more. This is a pretty strong card for only being 3 ink, but the limitation of banishing a character with 5 attack or more, a lot of decks don't even run characters that have 5 attack or more. So if you're facing an aggro deck, which you usually need more board control against, this card won't be effective because a lot of those aggro high questing characters have less than 5 attack. Unfortunately, Amber is not a very strong board controlling ink, although it is a very powerful aggro ink. However, this tier list is specifically for board control, so I'm going to put Amber here in the D tier. It has a decent amount of cards that can remove characters, but because of the specific limitations on those cards, they aren't very effective. Next, let's move on to the next ink here, and we have Amethyst. So Amethyst has Befuddle, which is a 1-drop action. You can return a character or item with the cost 2 or less to their player's hand. This is a pretty good card for early game, because if your opponent is playing aggro and they're putting out a lot of 2-drop or less characters, you can return them back to your hand, that they're playing back down again, and wait for that ink to dry. So because of that, I actually think this card is a lot better than the other Amber cards that we just saw. However, this is kind of Amethyst's only way to remove characters. Amethyst also has a card like Madam Mim Fox, which is a 3-drop inkable with 4 attack and 3 life. And then she also has Rush. And I think that Rush is also a great form of board control because you can do damage to a character right away by playing this character and they can immediately attack. Amethyst also has a card like Elsa, Spirit of Winter, which is an 8-drop uninkable. Deep Freeze, when you play this character, exert up to 2 chosen characters. They cannot ready at the start of their next turn. So even though this isn't necessarily character removal, it does control the characters because you exert them and they cannot ready back up. This is also a very powerful card for late game. If your opponent is very close to questing up to 20, you can stop them and halt the characters that they already have on the board. Overall though, I would still put Amethyst here in the D tier, but I do think it is better than Amber. The removal cards that Amethyst has I think are more playable. However, there just aren't enough cards that remove characters to make this a strong ink for character control. Let's move on to our next ink, Emerald. So Emerald has a card like Cheshire Cat, which is a 3-drop inkable, 0 attack and 3 life with 2 lore. When this character is challenged and banished, banish the challenging character. So this is a very good card for Emerald because you can play this card and this character can constantly quest for 2 every single turn. It doesn't have to be the one challenging. If your opponent wants to get rid of it and they want to challenge it, then this card can banish that opposing character. The only drawback to this card in terms of board control is that you can't choose who you're going to banish, right? You're just putting this threat on the board and hoping that your opponent attacks it with the character that you want to defeat. So it kind of is board control, but it kind of isn't. Now Emerald is a very interesting ink color because it has a card like Mother Knows Best, which is a 3-drop uninkable, and it's a song in action that you can return a chosen character to their player's hand. This is a very powerful effect because if you return a chosen character to that player's hand, they have to play it back again next turn, which might not sound super impactful immediately, but the fact that your characters have to ink in Lorcana means that that character can't activate. Then you can return it back to your hand, they have to play it back down again and then wait another turn. This would delay your opponent from questing with that character, and to me that is a very good source of board control. Emerald also has this 5-drop inkable song, We Don't Talk About Bruno. Return chosen character to their player's hand, then that player discards a card at random. This is very similar to Mother Knows Best. You can return a chosen character to that player's hand, and then they must discard a card at random, so you might get lucky and get rid of that character. This also combos really well with the Emerald Ink's ability to discard cards from your opponent's hand. Because of cards like these, I think that Emerald here belongs in the C tier for character control. It has very solid cards that can help remove a lot of characters from the board, but unfortunately a lot of times the opponent can play that character back down. However, it's still useful to get rid of that character momentarily to stall the game a little bit or prevent your opponent from questing and winning the game. Let's move on to our next ink, Sapphire. So Sapphire has a card like Let It Go, which is a 5-drop inkable song. Put chosen character into their player's ink while face down and exerted. This is a very powerful card because it gets rid of that character forever. When you put it into an inkwell, that character is gone. If you use this on your opponent's character, you can get rid of it, but your opponent will have that ink ready for their next turn. But that is not a big price to pay for getting rid of a strong character on the board. Sapphire also has Hades, Inferno Schemer, which is a 7-drop uninkable. Whenever you play this character, you may put chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell face down. Very similar effect to Let It Go, but you also get a character in Hades on the board. Sapphire, in my opinion, is pretty solid in character control with these 2 cards, but they are higher costed cards, which means that early game, Sapphire is not going to be the best in character removal. However, because of Sapphire's strong ramp, you can expect to see these cards a lot earlier than if you're playing other inks. I'm going to put Sapphire here in the B tier because it can permanently get rid of characters by putting them into the inkwell. Emerald can get rid of them, but they return back to the player's hand. And Steel is just better because it has early game actions and late game actions and can do AoE damage and single target damage. Finally, the last ink that we're going to be looking at is the Ruby ink. So Ruby is known as the best board control in the game. For the early game, it has cards like Teeth and Ambition, where you can do 2 damage to your own character and do 2 damage to an opposing character. It has cards like Sisu, where when you play her, you can banish an opposing character with 1 attack or less. It has cards like Brawl, where you can banish an opposing character with 2 attack or less. You have the super simple Dragonfire for mid-game, which is a 5-drop uninkable, where you can basically just banish any opposing character. You have cards like Prince Eric, where whenever he's banished, you can banish another character. You have Madame Medusa, which can banish a chosen character with 3 attack or less. You have Lady Tremaine, which can force your opponent to choose which one of their characters to banish. You have Sisu, Empowered Sibling, which has an AoE effect, which can banish all opposing characters with 2 attack or less. You also have a 9-drop inkable Maleficent Dragon, which can banish opposing chosen character. And of course, you have the iconic 7-drop uninkable Song, Be Prepared. The only total board wipe in the entire game of Lorcana. Whenever you play this card, you banish all characters in play. Because of this card specifically and all the other cards we mentioned, I think that Ruby definitely belongs in the S tier. Cream of the crop, the best character removal ink in the entire game. And that's not even to mention cards like Maui with Reckless and Rush. Ruby has so many different ways to banish opposing characters from early game, mid game to late game. It definitely earns its spot as being an S tier for character control. And I think it is better than Steel because Steel only does direct damage, not necessarily banishing a character, while Ruby can banish these characters despite how many health that they have, right? If you're facing against a character that has 9 willpower or 9 health, Ruby can just play Dragonfire and banish that character. Even if Steel plays a Then Along Came Zeus, it can do 5 damage, but you still need something else to finish off that character. Because of that, Ruby definitely earns a spot as number 1 in my character removal tier list. Let me know what you guys think of this tier list. Did I leave out any crucial cards that would have changed the rankings here? And if I did, which cards are they? This list is entirely subjective and just reflects my experience playing Lorcana. If you guys have a different experience with these ink colors, definitely let me know down in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.